mediums to do that, and these conversations that we have around these films that we see and are so inspired by are a way for us to understand what is happening in ways that we as individuals and organizations and the community around the ocean conservation can participate. So I am very excited about this conversation today. The International Ocean Film Foundation is here because we are an organization of volunteers. There are thousands of hours of volunteer time that go into making this festival, and all of our education and outreach programs all year long happen. So we are also a nonprofit 501c3. So if you are inspired by what you hear and you want to share with your friends, we appreciate that and welcome that. If you are inspired and want to consider us a part of your giving plans, you can do that on the back of your program. There's a QR code, and we are very much in favor of that as well. Thank you very much, and enjoy today's program.
Thank you so much. All right, we have the panelists up here. Thank you, everybody, for coming. All right. How's everybody doing today? It's been a great start to IOFF. Really great panel this morning. How many of you all were on the panel this morning? Really good one. Cool. I just love to start by reading the room a little bit. Whose first IOFF is this? Amazing. Okay. Who's like a long time IOFFer? Amazing. Cool. This is my year 3, and it's been so good to drop into this community. So thank you so much for coming out. I have friends and colleagues out there and people I don't know yet, and thank you so much. My name is Lindsay Gordon. I'm with Parley for the Oceans. I'm head of global programs, and I live here in the Bay Area. And we're really excited for this conversation today. We have amazing, amazing panelists here, people that I've been so grateful to weave in and out with my work over the past 10 years, Kahi being the longest. 10 years, I think, coming up, we've known each other. And today's topics are really, really exciting and near and dear to my heart for a couple of reasons. One reason is Parley for the Oceans, our main focus is on plastic pollution. Fighting plastic pollution on a global level and bringing together leaders, thinkers, innovators to create change. And what I've seen in the past decade in working in plastics is a change in narrative on plastics. Has anyone seen maybe a global change in narrative in the way people are talking about plastics? Yeah. Well, what I've seen is, 10 years ago or so, which was very important, but the plastics conversation for me was very much talking about the oceans and the harm to the oceans and the gyres with imagery of albatross, with dolphins getting caught up in nets. And what I've seen over the past few years is the conversation is not turning away from that, but it's turning to human health. And I'm really excited about that for a few reasons. One, we're learning more than ever, and we have some experts on this panel who can share some stuff with us about that. And two, because it's showing us that what we put out into the environment comes back to us no matter what. That we are intrinsically connected, and people care about human health. So there's more focus on this topic than ever. And that's why I'm really excited to have this wholesome panel where we're going to be going through how media and storytelling changes us. We're going to be going through human health and plastics. We're going to be going towards future materials or materials that bring us away from plastics, and also how coming back to community can bring us away from plastics and to much more things that we need to see through in this world. So with that said, it's my honor to introduce our panelists. We have Louie Psihoyos here. We have Dr. Yeah, a little clap for Louie. Come on. Great. We have Dr. Shanna Swan here, who also deserves a round of applause. Julia Marsh from Sway. And Kahi from Parley, Hawaii. And what we're going to do here today is I'm going to introduce our panelists a little bit about what they do, and then we're going to go into panelist questions one at a time. Kind of weave in and out organically, whatever arises, and at the end, hopefully we'll have some time for questions and answers. So let's begin. Louie Psihoyos. How many of you know any of the panelists here today? Good, okay, great. You will soon. Louie Psihoyos is an Oscar-winning director and a world-renowned National Geographic photographer who uses media to scale social change through his NGO, the Oceanic Preservation Society, and so much more. Dr. Shanna Swan here is an environmental and reproductive epidemiologist and professor of environmental medicine at the School of Medicine at Mount Sinai and founder of Action Science Initiatives. Her work examines the impact of environmental exposures on reproductive and neurodevelopment, and since 1998, Dr. Swan has conducted studies, now including more than 1,500 mothers and their children, to better understand prenatal and early childhood exposure to stressors. She's also published a number of meta-analyses. One is the most world-cited meta-analysis in the world. And Dr. Swan and co-author Stacy published Countdown, which I have the book right up there, one of the most amazing books. I think it is the book of the century. And to me, it is a pathway for how we're going to move away from this toxic age and everything that is connected to that. So thank you, Dr. Shanna Swan, for being here. All right, Julia Marsh is the CEO and co-founder of Sway, which is a Bay Area materials company which is scaling compostable packaging made with seaweed. Sway has developed patented materials that match the vital performance attributes of conventional plastics and seamlessly integrate into existing infrastructure. She's also won a number of awards, including a Fast Company Award, and has been highlighted on Forbes as well. And Kahi is the director of Parley, Hawaii, who began his career actually in real estate development, something that I learned recently. He then went on, after traveling and seeing what uncontained development does to the world, to found Sustainable Coastlines Hawaii, which has done so much in cleaning up Hawaii's beaches and connecting with community in Hawaii. And for about the past 6 years, he's been Parley Hawaii director, and we work very closely together day in and day out. All right, now that we've introduced our panelists, let's get started with Louie here. Louie. Hello. Louie and I have had a number of conversations lately, and the theme seems to surround around change and theories of change and how you bring media to the forefront to really stimulate change in the world and whatever topic you're diving into. So my first question for you is, how did you formulate this theory of change and drop into the media production that you've done with OPS?
When I started working on National Geographic, the first story I did was on garbage. And I thought, well, at the time we were doing stories on like gold, silver, diamonds, and I thought, well, could you use those same story principles to educate people about something that's really, just not shiny and beautiful, it's just or a perception of what is not valuable, just could change. At the time, 1983, we were, there was no mandatory recycling programs in America whatsoever. And I thought that's crazy. Other parts of the world you travel to, they're recycling everything. In fact, they would guard the dumps with soldiers because it was so bad they didn't want people to steal it, the garbage out of the dump. So I did this story for Geographic, and it was the most popular story of the year. And I realized that if you can entertain people and give them something that they, was counterintuitive, that you could change them. I realized that you could change people just by, coming through the system. Because photography and filmmaking is a different breed, but films are the most powerful weapon in the world that we have for social change. We have 90 minutes to sit with somebody's brain. And the movie industry looks at you guys as butts and seats, $10 a box of popcorn. I look at you as minds and seats. And when you have 90 minutes to sit with somebody's brain, you can actually change, not just entertain them, you can change the way they behave, which is the most powerful thing in the world that you can do, is to change people's, like when you come out of a room, it's like you see the world differently because you change somebody's mind.
Thanks for sharing that. I don't know if you know this, but you definitely changed my life, because when I saw the Cove, I started to work in ocean conservation. I went from working in a lab to working in action in ocean conservation. And I actually, my first, so proof right here, including, for example, Racing Extinction. How many of you have seen Racing Extinction? If not, I highly recommend it. 360 million people saw it day one in 220 countries. So really amazing what can be done with just a 90-minute film. And let's go ahead and play this trailer that shows a bit about your work right here.
I was a photographer for National Geographic magazine for almost 20 years. The first story I proposed to photograph for them was on garbage. About 50% of America saw it, and enough to help start the tipping point, and recycling began to take off. It was back then that I began to see the power of imagery combined with a compelling story to help change the world. The first documentary we did, The Cove, was about the killing of dolphins in Japan. At the time, they were killing about 23,000 dolphins and porpoises a year for human consumption. That film became the most awarded documentary in history and the first doc to sweep all the film deals. But more importantly, it created change. Because of the continued activism around that film, every year the number of dolphins killed in Japan declines. Last year, they killed 610, a 97% drop. We realized if film could work on this issue, maybe we could scale it up to help solve one of the biggest problems of our time. The second film we made was called Racing Extinction. Where the principal scientists called the Anthropocene, the sixth major extinction in the history of the planet. We're at this turning point right now where our generation is the last one that can affect the change we need to prevent a mass extinction. Racing Extinction was viewed by 36 million people in 220 countries and territories in just the first day. Through our educational campaign, 44,000 teachers showed our film to 2.5 million school children. All over America, kids began to take action in their schools and their communities. Working with organizations like the United Nations and the World Bank, we created large-scale projection nets around the world. We began to call attention to mass extinction at a scale way beyond people's imagination. We projected native species onto the Empire State Building, and within a week, we reached over 1 billion people. The issue became the top trend story on Facebook and Twitter for 4 days worldwide. I thought we couldn't get any more attention than that. And then the boat called. He invited us to check out the data during COP21. We wanted to remind world leaders that more was at stake with climate change than humanity. 25,000 people saw it at that time. 600 media outlets were there. And within days, we reached over 4.4 billion people.
Amazing. That must be one of the biggest campaigns in history. And we have no idea the change that happened as a waterfall effect from a movie like that.
Yeah, no, you reach that many people, so there's a lot of downstream effects that you just don't know. By the way, Parley supported those two events, the projection event on the Empire State Building and the one in the Bay.
Yeah, that was a good one. So let's segue into why you're here on this plastics panel. What you've been doing maybe with Shanna over here.
Oh, yeah, we wanted to do we started about 5 years ago, 2019, right before COVID hit, and we wanted to do a film on plastic pollution. And we saw the films that were out there, and it was like, I know, I felt suicidal, because it's just so depressing. I've been in the garbage for a very long time, way before it was popular. And I realized that, we have to come through it at a different angle. And in COVID, it was pretty easy to reach a lot of scientists because everybody had all this time. And so we were doing these, a lot of Zoom calls from around the world. And we'd ask every scientist we might meet, who should we talk to? And everybody kept on Shanna Swan. And we thought, well, what's she working on? And I thought that was the key to me, is because one thing that we've learned is that people, to create change, people need to assimilate it and find out that it's important to them. I mean, everybody here is probably an environmentalist of some sort, you probably care a lot about animals, but you're in the 1%, like single digits of people in the United States are like you. Probably somewhere between 3 and 7% of the people will change their diet because of the environment. You might be one of them, but that's not the norm. the way that we did a film called The Game Changers, and we started to, it really started to, veganism started to take off because we were speaking to people in a way that affected them. You know, guys want to have virility and endurance and strength, and they were told, or taught that you need to eat animals. And I can't remember the statistics for The Game Changers, but you know, it was a 350% increase in veganism the following month. It was on Netflix. It just, the numbers just took off. So we realized that we didn't talk about animals being safe. We didn't talk about the environment much. We just talked about it's good for you. And so we did the same thing with this film, where we realized that we know that there's a big plastic pollution problem, but when I started to learn through Shauna's work and others that it's in our bodies and it's affecting us, that's when I thought, oh, this is the light went on, that this is how it can touch everybody, because it affects everybody.
Thanks for sharing that. Shanna, do you want to speak a bit to how you got involved in this film and how you and Louie have been going on this journey together that's multi-year long now?
I don't actually remember our first contact, but it was in New York. I was living in New York, and Louie was filming me, and I don't think we had started talking about the subject of the film, which is, we'll talk about it, but I talk about my work. And what I've done for years is to try to understand how chemicals in our environment, not just in plastic, but those that can affect our body's hormones, can change our health in a very profound way. So the way I do that is I study people, and I study thousands of people. And if you want to know what's in your body right now in terms of chemicals, you can do that. I don't want to advertise, but anyway, there's a company called Julia Marsh. You can go online, Julia Marsh, pay them $200, I think. They'll send you a kit. You can send your urine, and they'll tell you what is in what chemicals are in your body. So I thought, well, that's not hard to do that, and we did that with our populations. And then the question is, what does this do? What is the harm? What is the consequence? Or what is the advantage? Maybe could be, unlikely, but what is the consequence of these exposures? So to do that, we have to follow people, and that's what I've been doing for a lot of years. So when we met, I was in the middle of one of these studies, and I was starting to ask, how can we do this differently? Okay? And that sort of segues into what I'm doing now, which is that the traditional way of doing science, which is you write a big grant, well, you used to before things changed. You write a big grant, and if you're lucky and successful, you'll be funded, and you'll be funded for millions and millions of dollars. And you'll do a grant that will take 5 to 10 years to execute. And then you'll get a piece of data, and then you'll speak about it in a conference, and you'll publish it in a journal, and that's it. And that's it. And that's it. So for me, the impact wasn't there. I'm doing all this work, good work, I'm winning the grants and going forward professionally, but what is changing in the world? And so I have to say that one of the big change points for me was when I went on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he said, are you telling me that the toxins in the environment are threatening the survival of the human race? And I said, yes. And he said, why don't people know about this? And that changed my life. Okay? So I don't do the academic route anymore. I have a small group supported by donors, and we carry out interventions. The first intervention was with Louie, and it was to see what happens if we remove these chemicals from people's lives. How does it impact their fertility? And this is a question that's very dear to my heart because I study reproduction, and that's, of course, fertility, sperm count, blah, blah, blah. So we got together, and I said, I want to do this. I want to look at couples. I want to see what happens if we actually ask them to use different food storage containers, different cosmetics and personal care products, different laundry products, different cleaning products, change their life in a way that decreases their exposure, right? And to make this impactful, we wanted to go with people who really needed this kind of change, and those who are infertile couples. And so that's how our collaboration began. We had started talking about something else, and we ended up doing this wonderful project together that involved years of filming and travel and meeting wonderful people and quite an adventure. Thank you.
Yeah, well, we took 6 couples who had unexplained infertility, and we didn't know why. And then Shanna, he did mainly BPA and bisphenol levels to do an urine test. For the males, she got a sample of the sperm, measured it. And I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 people almost everybody was subfertile, right? Except for Jesse,
Yeah.
who was like through the roof.
Yeah. 5 of the men had sperm counts in the subfertile range. Yeah, when we started.
Yeah, well, we can talk about we fast forward a little bit. So it takes men 70 days to generate new sperm. So we did a 3-month intervention, and 70 days. But we did a 3-month intervention so that it would fall in that period. And what happened?
Do you want me to give it away?
Yeah, let's hear it.
You're not telling me.
Well, I didn't totally have to talk about the outcomes actually, but first thing that happened is that when they reset their urine samples to the marker, their levels had dropped dramatically. So that was like the first success. They could lower their personal exposure by changing their personal care products, right? The second thing that happened was, this was not something we expected, but many of them reported a lot of quality of life improvements in terms of sleep, anxiety, depression, which was actually incredible because we hadn't even expected that. And then there was the question.
Weight loss too.
Sorry? And weight loss, yes. And so, there's no doubt that these chemicals are affecting us in lots and lots of ways that are harming us, including our reproduction. And I guess I could just say that all of them, except that one who had very good steam quality, saw their steam quality improve dramatically over those 3 months. You can say more if you want.
Amazing. This is the dream team right here, because this is the best of minds coming together. And Shanna, that's what I love about you, is that you really started in the trenches as a scientist, and you've come out and you've written, in my opinion, yes, one of the books that will change this world for the century. And what you're doing with Louie through this film, we hope and I believe will change the world. And let's actually play a sneak peek. It's about a 2-minute clip from this film. I don't know how many people have seen this.
Going all the way back to the 1940s, scientists could do no harm, right? It was a love affair, really, with plastic.
He says it's the chance of a lifetime.
It wasn't till quite a lot later that we realized that there was awesomeness.
The oil that we take out, not that we use to produce plastic. Plastic is a toxic chemical, you could say, only we don't consider it as a toxic chemical.
When you smell body plastic, you don't think, ooh, that smells great. It's all baking cookies. You think, why not seem to be dying, and it's taking my brain down the limits.
Petroleum plastics are so dangerously useful and so dangerously cheap. They're very hard to deviate.
The way that the United States risk management system works is we produce and market and use and ingest and inhale and absorb, and that has too much as a causing harm.
The EPA knows the toxic petrochemical facilities are the most toxic polluting facilities in the world and are killing black people throughout Louisiana.
Everything you have, your clothes, your glasses, the car you got are on, your phone,
so much about the science behind what's actually happening. My experience was before I knew the science of what was happening to our bodies, it felt like too much to address. I couldn't understand it. I felt like I was floating in no man's land with trying to find solutions. But once I started learning science, I started to be able to enact change. I started to be able to communicate it. Does anyone else feel like that sometimes with plastics and toxins? It's like, I don't really know what is good or what to look out for. Yeah, so that I think is a common experience. So what I would like to do right here, right now in this panel, is for you to share the science. Like, what are the top things that we should know when it comes to the science of how these chemical components work, the chemical groups of phthalates and bisphenols, particularly. Maybe how that's different too to microplastics, because that's a common question I get. And then we can go into the human health effects that we're seeing. How's that sound to everyone? Little lesson. All right.
So there are lots of chemicals in production in the world, right? But the ones that we're most concerned about is the ones that trick our body into thinking they're hormones. Okay? So you can imagine how dangerous this is. Our body's looking out for estrogen, testosterone. It's being governed by our hormones, the production of that, and where it goes, and where it travels, and how much. And if we have an imposter, a hormone imposter coming in there, sneaking under the radar, sitting in the receptors for the estrogen and testosterone, the body thinks, oh, I got enough of that, I don't need to make that. So, or there's too much of it, and then another system is set off. So what these chemicals are, I like to call them, hormone disruptors, chemical imposters, hormone, imposter. That's the best word I know, because they're sneaky and they're silent and they get into our body by every means possible. They're really good at that. So they come in through intestines, through food and water. They come into our skin. Like you put it free on your hand and it's gone in 20 minutes. Where is it? It's inside your body. So it's phthalates that make that happen. Okay. They also come in through inhalation. So think about nail polish or hairspray or anything. Any fragrance actually has these chemicals in it. Stay away from fragrance if you possibly can, apart from maybe some natural oils and stuff. So it's a very hard job, and I have to tell you that we should not have to do the war guns. Okay? It is not our job, but it has been made our job because the government is not doing it. Okay? And Lindsay reminded me of a quote, which I'll repeat, which is that in the US we have 11 products that are banned from personal care products, components. In the EU there are 1,100. Okay? So we are not protected by our country. And in the EU, the manufacturers cannot put a product into circulation, into the market, until it is proven safe. In the US, anything goes. Put it out there, and if it's bad, well, the science will find out eventually. I'll tell you, that takes a very, very long time. And lots of people are exposed before we learn it. And then we go to the process of trying to regulate it and getting it out of the system. It's an impossible task. So we've got it wrong in this country, and it's not perfect in Europe either. And as a result, we're exposed all the time through all these drugs, to all of these chemicals. What can you do? Okay, I'll just tell you a few things. Of course, I'm going to say read my book, count on because we have a lot more in there. But I would say the first thing is the two big classes that I'm most concerned about are the things that lower testosterone and those that raise estrogen, because I study reproduction. But there are other classes of chemicals we have to worry about. Maybe those that affect the immune system, those that make our fat, those are the obesogens, and so on and so forth. So I just stopped my focus on reproduction, so I focus on these steroid hormones that are governed in reproduction. Okay, so what can we do? Well, phthalates, how many people have soft water bottles? Have had soft water bottles? You're not going to admit it, right? But,
Not here.
but most people use soft water bottles, soft plastic in their lives. Soft water bottles are based off by phthalates. if they're coming in contact with food or drink, like a water bottle, or foods you're gonna, you know, something you're gonna put your food in, like a soft food container, and then don't heat it. Because what happens when you heat it? The phthalates are not tightly bound to the matrix, the chemical plastic itself, they're put in there. And so when you heat it, they leave the matrix, they get into the food, you eat the food, it gets into your body, and it does harm. Okay? So that's sort of one sort of general thing. Don't mix anything you put in your body, food, drink, and soft plastic. Hard plastic, what about that? Hard plastic, like a hard water bottle or a hard baby bottle, that is full of something called the bisphenols. And the bisphenols make it hard, and they increase your estrogen. Now, you know, women know a lot about estrogen and progesterone because they governs their cycles, and those who are oral contraceptives. Oral contraceptives are hormone disruptors, by the way. They're made to disrupt your hormones, right? That's what you take. And estrogen is one of them. So, do you want to be drinking out of bottles that's containing a chemical that's doing that to you? I don't know. I don't. So, I would say that the first thing you want to do is avoid, whenever possible, estrogens. Bisphenols and phthalates, okay? But there are many, many others. What about these micro nanoplastics that we've all heard about? This is very concerning for a couple of reasons. One is they carry the old bad actors that we knew about for a long time. They carry, these are piggybacking onto these little plastic particles. But in addition, the plastic particles invade our cells and our tissues. They're sharp, think about it, you want little broken pieces of plastic inside your lungs, inside your placenta, inside your testes, inside your brain, because they're there. Okay, so our job, all of us here, is to change our use of products so we can stop this devastating, barrage insult of these chemicals into our body.
Thank you, Shanna. Yeah, once we start learning these things, something that we were talking about the other day, Shanna, is people can then decide with the information, they have the information to decide where on the spectrum of choice they want to end up. Because we can't do it all, but if we know we shouldn't be microwaving our food, if we know that cans, even the organic cans, the green cans are lined in BPA, even the metal cans are lined in BPA, then at least we can make the choices for ourselves. But I also wanted to turn, and maybe Louie, you can chime in here, on the systemic change that can come from this information and what people like you and I, people in this room, can do not only to change our human health for the better, but to contribute to the systemic change that we need to see.
What can we do?
What can we do to contribute to this systemic change that is beyond us, that is, facing these petrochemical industries?
Well, I mean, aside from the things that Sean mentioned, I mean, the goal of our film is to get, tens of millions of people to see this film like they have with little other films, and then motivate companies to get on board to change, because we need to have products out there. We need innovation like what you're doing, and then we need governmental change so that it's more like the EU with the REACH program, where it's like you mentioned in your book, the analogy of the laws, like you have to prove it guilty first, right? And
the quote is, this was an amazing quote from the book, it was, innocent before proven guilty works in our justice system, but it does not work when it comes to toxins in our health.
Yeah, about 2 years ago when I was working on this, I went out on a date with a woman, and she said, what are you working on? I said, I'm doing a film on plastics. She said, are you doing it in textiles? I go, no, why? She goes, everything you have on is plastic and toxic. And I didn't realize that the clothes I was wearing at the time were, polyester, and even if you have a cotton shirt, is probably dyed with petrochemicals. And so your body absorbs, 65% of what you put on it. So you're using, your Lululemons and your tights, and you're going out to hot yoga. It's probably finding its way into your body and affecting everything. But we're doing it. Our closet, our closets are full of, toxic chemicals. So actually, Lee is, he's here too. She's there's a natural clothing place, but it's if you see this film, hopefully everybody's mind will be changed, because you'll start. One thing we do is we go through somebody's house and do point out all the things that you wouldn't think of: the plastic spatulas, the tea bags, microplastics, and it's almost everywhere. But once you see it, you can't unsee it, and that's the hope. Is that once you do that, you have these two eyes. You go to the grocery store and you start looking. Okay, you start looking at the packs, you start looking at the products, and your life has changed. And all change happens with the first step, right? So everybody says, "Oh, just one person," but guess what? One person changes. You start telling your neighbor. And that's how these things go viral. Everybody has that power. Everybody says, everybody says, "I'm just one person. What can I do?" Well, it turns out a whole hell of a lot. Because it's change. Positive change is like a virus, a healthy virus. And the way I figure it, you go on Joe Rogan, you see, 30 million people, and then you go on Comedy Central's another 50 million, and people start hearing about it. And when we started this film, nobody knew about plastics and human health that I knew. It's been out there, but now it's like it started to be a tsunami. And that would be the goal is to constituents, people, change the minds and seeds, getting the companies to change, which we talk about soon, what you're doing, and then getting policy change. And I do have hope. For whatever you think of Bobby Kennedy, this is going to be the next thing on his agenda. I don't know if I can even talk about this stuff. No, I can't talk about it. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, so there's some people working in this administration that actually are simpatico with what we're doing.
Yeah, I think in terms of policy too, thanks for sharing that, Louie. What you speak to in the book, Shanna, the precautionary principle, is huge for me, which is we do not have a precautionary principle in the policies in this country, many other countries around the world too, where it's, we found out something is really toxic, then down the road, maybe policy gets changed. But what we need is a precautionary principle, and my hope, Louie, is that this film, I know it will change the minds of many, many people, and some of those people are policy people, some of those people are industry people, and it will create a wave of change, just like you did with raising extinction. So we're really, really excited for the film. Can we have another round of applause for the film coming up? Thank you. And speaking to solutions, we're going to turn to Julia Marsh now from Sway, she is in the trenches with an active solution, which is Sway, your product, which is amazing. Do you have it on you right now? No. You can check it out after the booth over there, but Julia, you want to tell us a little bit about Sway?
Sure. So happy to be here and surrounded by legends. These are like OG plastic warriors, so seriously, I'm a newcomer here, but I'm inspired by their work to be designing solutions. I feel half of the effort needs to be centered on awareness and motivating businesses to change and eliminate materials, and then we've got to create new materials to replace them with where they're still necessary. So my background as a designer working within packaging systems inspired me to say, what are the necessary packaging materials that need the qualities of plastic, unfortunately, and how can we replace them with futuristic materials that actually replenish the planet as they're being developed and used, that are free from these chemicals and that can return to soil after their useful life is over.
It's been amazing what you've done. Can we actually move the slides to showcase the product? So, a little bit back. Back. Oh, it's not on this one. I'm sorry, Julia. Okay, that's some computer issues. Julie's product is amazing because it's not only replacing plastic, it has zero plastic in it, and it's not one of these greenwashing companies. You're working with kelp fishermen around the world, supporting sustainable kelp farms, and sustainable kelp fisheries. So can you speak to a little bit about how that supply chain works and how supporting something like kelp is a win-win for everything?
Yeah, so as I was evaluating the potential feedstocks of the future, I was looking at materials that naturally regenerate in nature. It's the third pillar of the circular economy, which says we need to replenish natural systems. And there's a lot of materials, fortunately, that do that. I think maybe a lot of you are familiar with mycelium, the mushroom, replacements for foam or leather. There's cattail fluff, there's microbes, there's pea protein, there's agricultural waste, and there's seaweed. And seaweed is, I think, the most naturally generous feedstock for alternative materials because it doesn't need any inputs really. It's really resource efficient, no fresh water, no pesticides, no land. It grows incredibly quickly, it's farmed all around the world, and it's rich in natural polymers. Seaweed on the beach, it has this natural kind of gelling property. It's in a lot of our skin cream, it's in a lot of our toothpaste, and we use that same gelling property to replace flexible plastics. And we blend it together with other plants to create a pellet, and this pellet flows through traditional plastic infrastructure. You can see the pellet right over there. So this is kind of the groundbreaking innovation. It's really hard to do this. It's hard to make biology compatible with a system that's been optimized over 100 years for petroplastics. So I won't say that it's been easier, that we have it all figured out, or that the solution is perfect. But the really cool thing, and something that builds on what you were saying, Louie, is that we're able to partner with the traditional plastic industry, who hears the demand of you and I saying we don't want plastics. That's the only reason that they're making the switch. They see the writing on the wall. They know that we don't want plastic in our bodies. And they're motivated to say, all right, I'll give this hippie from California a chance with their seaweed material, even though I don't want to, because there's so much demand for solutions.
It's amazing that now we have the solution. 10, 15 years ago, we were saying, okay, we know what the problem is, we know the harm, but how are we going to ever replace plastics? And the solution is right here. And what we're seeing is we really just need the investment, in financial investment, in resources, and attention, because we're up against something really, really big, which is the petrochemical industry and plastics industry. So give us some hope here. Give us some hope for what we can see here. Even though we're up against these big guys and it's threatening and it's scary, give us some hope.
So many solutions that were a dream several years ago are actually making their way into the mainstream now. So more and more every year, you're going to be seeing more better materials in everyday products. And I know this because we're all friends with the innovators, and we know that there's a lot of traction building and a lot of demand building for the solutions. So you're going to be seeing, not just in your packaging, but in your clothing, in the food that you're eating, in your sources of energy. There's all these better materials making their way into the mainstream. Lots of reasons to be hopeful.
Lots of reasons to be hopeful, and what Sway's done and the places you've been seen and being talked to, places that you're talking, it's obviously, it's your time. So really, really excited for that. Yeah. Thank you, Julia. All right, let's turn to Kahi over here. Kahi, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and what you do at Parley, Hawaii?
Right on, aloha. Well, at Parley, Hawaii, I focus on kind of what Louie does, but on a much smaller scale. For our perspective, like, the issue of plastic pollution is front and center where I'm from. We are the landing place for all of the Northern Pacific's trash. It just washes up on our east side beaches. I brought a little sample, you can see it on the table over there, just the microplastic issue that we're having. And it's an invasion. And a lot of people still don't understand the issue, despite everybody thinking that we all know about the plastics issue. We run into so many individuals that have never heard of microplastic before, and we feel the best way for them to experience it is through hosting cleanups. We realize that cleanups are not the answer to the problem, but it's like one of the easiest gateways to finally recognizing that it is an issue, and then taking the steps to understanding, okay, what about the health implications? What are the solutions like new materials, etc.? or how can we lobby our government to stop the invasion of plastics on our beaches. And recently we've been transitioning more to focusing not just on the local community, but also on the visitor industry. As you can imagine, Hawaii is full of tourists, and like the debris, they're not from here, they're not from Hawaii. And we realized that if we just became the best consumers and had really good waste management in Hawaii, we'd still be stuck with this plastic pollution problem until the rest of the world got together too. So what better way to start influencing the broader community than to start engaging the tourist industry, the visitor industry. So we're working with hotels, trying to provide educational events at their properties, getting them to get off of single-use plastics altogether, create innovative partnerships, looking for ways that they can remove all types of plastic, be it their key cards or their coffee makers, etc., out of their industry, and influence these people to go back home and be like, hey, I love Hawaii so much that I'm going to change my consumer behaviors because I know now that my consumer behaviors here, potentially in San Francisco, are impacting the place I love in Hawaii. So that's kind of the main stuff I do there, and then the other part is around youth engagement. We're really into influencing the youth. I didn't really get much environmental education as a kid, and I feel like now is a great time. The kids are receptive, and we are really focusing in schools, and we host a really fun youth leadership summit. I see Rachel in the back. I think she helped. She was the leader of one of the cleanups at the last Ocean Uprise Summit. And we're going to be doing another one of those where we bring in 15 of the world's youth leaders from around the world, fly up to Hawaii and put them up and have this beautiful summit for 5 days. And then we bring 15 local kids that are leaders in Hawaii. And the youth leaders from Hawaii get this experience of seeing these kids that are the leaders of their country, while at the same time the leaders from the different countries, they get to see that these youth in Hawaii bring a much more rooted ancestral knowledge and indigenous knowledge and indigenous wisdom into the way that they interact with each other, the way they interact with the community, and the way they interact with the environment, and take it back home with them. So that's really the focus of our work, and then obviously these air stations. So we started to create these centers that are hubs, they're community hubs. We have one on Maui, one on Oahu, we have one in Chile, one in South Africa, and what they are is a place for Parley specifically, first and foremost, to create our programming, to bring people together, but they're also a community hub for any nonprofit organization to come and utilize to spread what they're doing. So it's just a community resource that communities haven't really had in the past. It's free to use, and we're trying to make education fun and continue to make community service fun, something that you want to do instead of something that you feel like you're obligated to do. So that's my spiel.
Thank you, Kahi. Thank you so much. Can we get a round of applause for Kahi? It's incredible since we started doing these education stations at Parley, what can happen when people come together in place and community. And that's what I love so much about the work that you do, Kahi, is it's all about community and place. And the reason that I started working with Parley and in plastics about 10 years ago is because I saw plastics as a mechanism to that, to coming back to community, to coming back to place, and solving so many more of the issues that are beyond plastic that are so connected. Shanna, you said to me the other day, you said climate and toxicity are two sides of the same coin. Well, so is human health and planetary health and plastics, and everything's so connected. And again, what I love about the work that we do is that it's really going in with community and finding out what community needs are and working hand in hand. That yeah, maybe plastic is like one entry point, but so much more comes from that. So that's a good segue to talk about the restoration project that you're doing that I had the honor to visit last time I was in Hawaii. And I think we can start with the intro video too to show that. If you want to click. Oh, this is really awesome. This sifts out microplastics.
Yeah, we hosted in my former capacity as the executive director of Sustainable Coastlines, we hosted a sand sifter challenge where people would design a way to sift the plastic out of our beaches. So this was the winner of the first one that we did. We had a $1,000 prize purse, and this guy won $1,000, and then ended up building about 5 more of them. You scoop sand on one side, you spin it, and the plastic shoots out the other end. And this is it in work. There might be a video. I don't know.
It's on.
All right. Let's go to the next slide.
These are some examples of cleanups.
Yeah.
Next.
And this is so I think I mentioned this. Our community restoration impact that we're trying to work on now is we found a beautiful piece of land. Obviously, you can see it's oceanfront that was fallow. It was beyond fallow. It was a dumping ground. It was a dump. It was where the community would defecate because there wasn't a bathroom close enough. And it was, in our vision, when we went to go clean it up, we were like, this could be a park. It was overrun with a very invasive plant, and we just decided, without the community's, I wouldn't say the community, without the counties, the city and county of Honolulu's blessing, we just started removing all the invasive plants and planting native plants. And a week later, I got an email from the county and said, you did that without a permit, please remove all plants immediately. And I wrote back to them and I said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. It is illegal for me to remove native plants from public lands. And they instead suggested that we meet on site so they could talk them through our intentions and our goals and where we're headed. My thought was that if we could get the people that utilize this beach, this is called Sandy Beach, the Hawaiian one's called Vavamalu, and it's one of the most popular beaches in the entire state, and people are there every single day from sunrise past sunset, and people love it, but they don't take care of it. And what I want to do, and it's starting to happen, is for the people that utilize these places to take a sense of responsibility. In Hawaiian, we call it kuleana, that you are responsible for the places that bring you so much joy. It's not such an extractive experience. You need to contribute back to it. And I started recognizing how this also is relevant to the plastic pollution crisis as well, in the same way. So what we're doing is we've now been blessed by the city and county of Honolulu. They've allowed us to adopt the park. We are planting trees. We've got a nice grassy area where people can picnic, and the park is sustaining itself. It's happening, and we don't have a name for it yet. It'll come to us someday. But this is the first park project that we've taken on with Parley. I hope to see more of these growing throughout the world, because I think bringing community to come together and keep a place clean eventually leads you, obviously, to seeing what else you can take care of, which is potentially, hopefully, yourself.
Yeah, thank you. And we all know, too, that when we come together and put our hands in the ground, just so much more happens beyond what you're doing with this park as well. So let's go ahead and play this little clip.
Nearing our 3-year anniversary from the first day we started working on this park, and it's absolutely turned into what I think is one of the gems of the entire state of Hawaii for parks. You're overlooking one of the best waves in the world. There's whales jumping out in the background. We're elevated up, surrounded by native plants. It's just absolutely gorgeous. We couldn't have been able to do this without volunteers that came here today, or the volunteers that show up on a daily basis to take care of these plants. So this is just a really cute example of community galvanizing together to bring something to life. In a sense, just doing something. And I couldn't be prouder. I'm super excited to see where it's going to be in the next 3 years. So thanks, everybody.
And I just wanted to also just from Parley's perspective, I think the organization has always been so flexible. We're constantly evolving, and that's one of the things I love about it so much. And even for my own self, of like going through the process of first seeing microplastic on my beach and realizing I needed to change my entire life, I've learned so much. And Parley has too. We've pivoted throughout the years. So when I did this project in the same way, I didn't really tell my bosses I was going to do it. And they're fully for it, and they love it. So a big shout out to Cyril and Leah.
Shout out to our bosses. All right, we're gonna hit next. Thanks. Yeah, I thought we'd go into a little bit about Parley, because what Kahi's doing is he's not only director of Parley Hawaii, but works on Brazil and Argentina, and we have teams in 14 countries around the world. And what we do is we really work to fight plastic pollution, but we adapt, just like Kahi's saying, based the local circumstances, based on the local needs. So if you want to just flip through, we don't have much time, but yeah, we work as a collaboration network, so we really try to invite in anybody and anyone who wants to be part of this, and anyone who doesn't want to be part of this, really, because that's what we need, right? We need that cross-pollination anywhere that we go. And our strategy, if you want to go back one more, is the air strategy. Coming from every other breath we take comes from the ocean. So everything we do is focus on avoiding plastic, intercepting plastic, cleaning up, or redesigning, like everything that we're talking about here, working with the creative industry in this amazing network. One of my favorite things about working at Parley is that we get to work with the coolest people in the world, all around the world. So Kahi, do you want to, so I'm not hearing the mic too much, do you want to kind of talk through a little bit more about what we do about Parley? Over a couple minutes, and we have a few slides just to get through.
On a broader scale.
Yeah.
So
Take it on.
we're trying to reinvent plastic, right? That's one of the main things we want to do is find an entirely new material, and that's why we work with Swell, right? Sway. We work with like Banana Techs and all these other different types of companies trying to figure out how we can replace plastics altogether. We are all about education, so that's where we're doing these cleanups around the world. We're doing the education, and then a lot of nonprofits don't like working with corporate entities. They feel that they're the bad guys, and in a sense, a lot of times they are. But there are some that you can interact with and convince them that it's advantageous to start integrating new materials into their product line, educate their ambassadors, their athletes, and create real change, because the consumers are going to be wanting it or desiring it. So getting ahead of the curve is you either change or you get left behind. So we are actively working with brands, whereas a lot of nonprofits refuse to. So that was one of the things that drove me to Parley, was seeing opportunities to affect the corporate side. So there's a ton of
There's a lot. We're going to contain it. Sorry, were you going to say there's a ton of things to go through here? Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot we could go through here, and thanks so much for sharing all that, Kahi. These are just some of our stats, and if you want to hit next and play, this is our air station, which is very similar to what Kahi's doing in Chile. Which just speaks to the fact, again, when people come together, solutions naturally emerge and arise, and that's Kahi, what seems to be everything that you're holding in Hawaii. So we'll skip over the rest of the slides here for time, but Kahi, my final question to you is, in this day and age, it's very hard, I think, for most of society to stay focused on the local. We all have either jobs remotely or family remotely, or are really busy, so we go to that grocery store that doesn't carry the local products. But my sense is a lot of these solutions, it's simple and it's not so simple, is about coming back to our place, getting to know our land, coming back to community, shopping at our farmers markets so we don't have to get the BPA lined can or the vegetables wrapped in plastic that actually, even by touching the plastic, makes its way into our bodies. So my question for you is, what would be your advice to anyone who asked you, what is the first step I can take towards localizing my life just a bit more?
first it's really hard. And like being in the environmental space and going out shopping is very challenging. I got 2 young kids as well, so it makes it even more challenging. But the first thing to do is just look for the low-hanging fruit. That's the easiest one. What are the touch points in your life where you're touching a lot of plastic, and what can you get rid of? The easiest one for me in the beginning was really like hit a really good point were the toothbrushes, because we find so many toothbrushes on beaches. You wouldn't believe how many toothbrushes we find. So just right there, switching to the toothbrush, starting your day off in a fresh way, and being like, yo, I'm not using a plastic toothbrush. And then what's the next thing? It's like, what's what I put on toothpaste? All right, so I'll make some toothpaste out of some charcoal, some baking soda, and maybe something else. Like, those are some real simple things, but the touch points, also your water bottle. But these are all things that we all know already. But if you were new to it, those would be some of the simple things. But it's tough, and I think the bigger solutions are the new materials, trying to figure out ways that we can replace those materials. But I'm cautious that we all of a sudden just go and replace, or think that we can replace one material with another, and then we're still stuck with single-use plastic or single-use mentality. And I would really like us to start focusing more on reuse and valuing quality and long-lasting and vintage and that type of approach. Because if we just replace plastics with bioplastics, like, we're still going to have waste to deal with. We're still consuming, and that's not sustainable in its own right. Nothing against what you're doing, because I love it. Okay, cool. But the whole single use is a huge issue. And the other thing was, I would love people to understand the fallacy of recycling plastic. When I started my journey, I was very idealistic. I thought we could recycle this ocean plastic. I saw the beaches as a potential resource, and I was going to mine the beaches. 'Cause as you heard, I used to be a real estate developer, so I was very much about making money. So I thought that there was a potential resource there, and over the years, I've seen the health implications of trying to do it, and I've seen the costs of doing it, and I've come to the conclusion that it's not healthy, and it's not cost effective, and most importantly, it sends off the wrong signal to the consumer that we can continue to just consume. Like, they've got a solution to the problem. Why do I have to change? Let's just keep using this material. So that's why this film and the work that Shanna is doing is so important, because it's going to take it beyond just the trash issue or the animal issue, and it's like, yo, this is affecting me, and it's affecting my kids, my grandkids, and like my entire family line. So I'm really excited for you guys' work.
Thank you so much. Thanks to all the panelists. I think this is a good segue to questions. Questions from the audience. Oh, you know what? Can we hit the slide back? Because, keep going. Forward, sorry. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. This is our work in the Maldives. Keep going. Dominican Republic. Oh, here is, before we get to questions, I just wanted to highlight some really amazing local organizations who are doing good work here in the Bay. I think it's always important to support, lift up everyone locally here. Some of them I know intimately, some of them I don't, as well as healthy materials, including swag here, including cloth boundary here. So shout out to all of these people, because none of us can do it alone here. So, and then if you go next, yes. Does anyone have questions? And if you don't have questions, or you don't want to raise your hand for questions, this is a QR code. You can enter your questions into a Google form. I can either read them here, or if we don't have time to, our panelists can get back to you. All right, question in the back. Do we have a mic back there?
We got her a mic right here. She had a question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see this. You're number 2. Okay. Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much. Brilliant work for all of you. And I'm working in a company that focuses on tourism decarbonization. decolonization and also ocean conservation. And so we're in a lot of climate conferences, and so everything that you're saying here is so relevant. And I have anxiety around climate and plastics are not allowed in the office, and many of them, you know. But I think I have a feeling it's just so overwhelming. Like, you go to the store and you're speaking to this, like, there are things that you can do in individuals, but I go and what you grab for something that's in plastic and it's hard to avoid. And I think the point is, it's really the oil companies that are forcing the emissions, you know, spike, and also the plastic, right? They don't want to invest to get rid of plastics. And so it's great to have a grassroots approach, but do you have suggestions on addressing it too? And I think you guys are attracting, you know, millions and millions with your messaging, but what can we do for the oil companies that are at COP26, you know, at the COP conferences and using all of their advertising and persuasion for us to not get away from plastics?
Well, first thing we could do is we could convince Louie to do a film on repealing Citizens United. He's looking at me. So the tough part is that, yeah, that our corporations have way too much influence, especially the oil industry, on our political campaigns and their ability to elect officials and donate money to campaigns, which then hold those politicians beholden to those companies, and that's why we can't get any bills pushed through. And it's all on the crux of one Supreme Court analysis of Citizens United, which is, if it were to be repealed, would revoke the power, well, not revoke all of it, but revoke a lot of the power from the corporations. That's the biggest, and if we were able to pull that pin, that would be probably the biggest thing, in my opinion, that we could do. And that takes us lobbying our representatives and our senators. Other than that, at a store, like, this is what I do. I try to buy in bulk, so there's less packaging, and I grow a lot of my own food. So, you know, starting to look at the importance of just having a small garden, and you know, I have a pretty small garden, and I eat out of it every single day. You end up using a lot less plastic because you're not having to buy it from whatever from the store. And then you take all of your food scraps, you compost it, and that's just a great way to do it at home. So those are two huge differences, but like, if personally at home, bulk, and grow as much as you can on your own.
Farmers markets.
Yeah, farmers markets as well. And then, yeah, the biggest thing for me would be like, hey, let's repeal Citizens United.
Thanks, Kahi. Anybody else here? Yes?
So in the film, we went shopping, and and we went around and one of the couples had a little girl, and she got involved, and I said, look, let's play a game. Let's see how little plastic we can put in our cart. And so when we went to the lettuce, you know, there was loose lettuce and there was wrapped lettuce, and I said, let's put down loose lettuce. Yeah, she said, put it in the cart. And we did that through the whole shopping tour, and I think we should get the kids involved, actually, because it's for them, you know. And so let's try to make a game of it, not only for them but for us. Challenge yourself. Challenge yourself. Is this okay? And there's some apps you can get, like Clearya is an app, CLEARYA. You can scan the barcode and it'll tell you what's in it. There's the Environmental Working Group. There are other apps. I have to say, you know, word of caution, these companies do not actually test. Testing products is very difficult. We're doing that in our company now, but they scan ingredients. So they look at the ingredients on the package, they look at the list of bad actors that governmental, you know, agencies have put out, like Process Design and so on, and then compare. So depending on how many bad things like those lists they have in the package, they'll get a rating. Okay? But it's sure better than nothing. So I would suggest, you know, try to get Clearya or another similar number of them, and make it a game for yourself. Can I do a little better today than I did yesterday? but glad you're all on.
Yeah, there's an app that we use. It's called Yuka. So you scan it, like a barcode before you get, before you put it in your cart, you scan it and it'll give you a grading system. It's pretty cool. It's immediate.
Yeah, Yuka's great, and just want to highlight again, environmental working group, like you said, EWG.org is such a good tool, and it puts the power back in our hands. And I don't know if we emphasized this fact enough before, but Shanna, your fact on 1% decline in fertility markers since the 1970s, that's what we're looking at in effect of these chemicals. And 2% decline in sperm count since 2000, I believe you told me the other day. So it seems all in the same, we're doing the same thing by choosing not to buy and purchase plastic. We're fighting these big companies, petrochemical, and we're also helping our body. Did you have something to say again, Kahi or Julia?
I have a little bit to add, which is we are, I believe, successfully developing a culture of disgust around plastics, which is really effective because, again, having, as recently as this week, sitting in like a group of salespeople who sell plastic, that culture of disgust is impacting their numbers, and nothing is more motivating than the dollars that are on the table. And right now, better alternatives, right now it's going to be paper that's winning the day, presents a more attractive option for these sales folks within plastics companies. So I feel like the more we develop this culture of disgust, which it sounds like you're doing very successfully, the more pressure is going to be put on plastics companies to come up with better alternatives that are going to win over, it's 80% of environmental waste is determined at the design stage. We have no control over it. So keep pushing. It's working.
Thanks so much. We're going to go to a question back here and then a question back there.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so looking forward to Louie's film. And I'm super curious about what you were talking as it relates to the microplastics and how it infiltrates our body. And I'm curious to know, are there any biomarkers in terms of tests that actually you could reference that people could, or ourselves could take to see actually what's inside each of us? Because I'm sure that when Louie's film comes out, that's going to be the first question people are going to ask is, okay, that's great, what's inside? And then the second thing is, how do we deal with it? And I think it's a much bigger problem than we're really, really aware of, and I'd be curious to know your thoughts.
So measuring microplastics is difficult. There are labs that are doing this around the world, but before microplastics, there were plasticizers, and they're still there. And so the microplastic particles harm us in two ways, and one of them is the chemical they carry, an off gas, if you will, and those have been with us since.
No, I'm aware of that. I'm curious to know, because they say that like when it goes in, it leaches, it gets into our tissues, and I'm curious, how are we able to detect, right, what's inside?
Scientists are doing that with fishes and with all kinds of non-human species and with human tissue, and they're looking at these very carefully under new methodology that you can't use just the old LC-MS or whatever. They're doing careful measurements in a very clean lab, by the way, because you're worried about pollution, and they're identifying these particles inside these tissues. So it's going on right now. It's relatively new science, and
but is there like a general test for like layman, your COVID test? Is there like a?
He wants to know what a person can do to measure their levels.
Oh no, you cannot. You cannot measure your. I know of no home testing for microplastics, but you can measure the plasticizers, the chemicals in your body. For example, I told you Julia Marsh. There are many. There are other ways to do that. So some are in urine, some are in blood, but to do it yourself or easily, you have to do it in the tissues that we can collect easily, and that's urine and blood and saliva possibly, although I don't think that's being done. So, but to actually do it in tissues, they do things like going to autopsies. They go, because it's very good at these, or they get them in the operating room. You want to talk about that?
pediatrician, and he's on the beach with his wife in Sardinia, and he was like, oh, look at, the beautiful sand here, the colors that she did. That's not sand, that's microplastics. And he had this shock of horror because he said, well, if it's out there in the ocean, it must be in our internal sea. And this guy has delivered more babies than anybody in Rome, over 50,000 children. And he started testing the placentas of children and finding out that microplastic was in placentas. Then he's the one that also discovered in mother's milk. And it was basically everywhere he looked, they were finding microplastics. And that was, and now the study came out last week. They said there's in almost every one of us, there's equivalent of a plastic spoonful of plastic in our brain. And if you don't think that's doing any harm, I think it's.
It goes through all our barriers, right? The blood-brain barrier, the blood-testing barriers. They go through all our barriers. It gets everywhere. It's everywhere in your body. Yeah. So in your testes, in your skin, in your brain. You look, you'll find it.
Yeah, it should probably say this is in the book, it's in the film. Shanna discovered something called the phthalate syndrome. You want to talk about that? Because Joe Rogan calls you the Paul Revere of tiny testicles and taints.
Well, it's not really relevant to this question yet.
I think everything is related to that.
Okay, just really quickly.
Because it's really, these chemicals are in your body, but what's it actually doing? And this is there's some real world consequences to it besides fertility.
So for a pregnant woman, she's carrying the child, and the exposure to that child in early pregnancy especially is the most tricky time. Okay, because that's when cells are most rapidly dividing and things that are going to have the longest impact if you harm them, right? So in animals, they showed that when the mother was given phthalates, and of course animals you can actually administer, kind of people, but we're not supposed to do it, right? But so if you give these phthalates to the mother, the pregnant dam, and then you look at the offspring, and what you see is that the males have genitals that are not completely masculinized. Yeah. So they're smaller, and no man wants that, right? And also, what they focused on, and what I began to focus on, is something which the kids know as the taint, or the grundle, or the gooch, or
Sandbar.
It's the distance from the anus to the genitals, and where you actually take that general measurement. There's a couple of choices, but anyway, it basically measures the size of the area, and you can imagine that in men it's much bigger than women because there's a lot more real estate to go in there, right? Yeah. Okay. So you're with me on that? Okay. So what we found was they found that in rats, that when the mother was given these phthalates, that distance was smaller, more feminine. And that turned out to have implications for fertility and sperm count later on. So it's a really, really important marker. It's a marker of what happened in utero. It's a marker of what's going to happen in the future. Kind of like the genius of both ways, right? And I asked, well, what about humans? Because I learned that humans are exposed to all these phthalates. So I thought, well, are we having that syndrome? And the answer is yes. It took me first study 5 years, $5 million, second study another 5 years, another $5 million. I nailed it. The phthalate syndrome is caused by exposure of the mother to phthalates in early pregnancy. Okay.
And, just to add to that, with they take genetic identical species of mice, and they give one microplastics, and the other one the same amount of exercise, the same amount of calories, but the one exposed to microplastic is, I think, it's like 75% heavier, and it affects the epigenome, so that its progeny 4 to 5 generations downstream are also heavier. So it's affecting, at least, so it's a
that's a really good point, Louie, and we didn't talk about it, and I should have probably talked about it. This is not something that's just about you, it's also about your kids and your grandkids and your great-grandkids, because these things don't stop causing harm.
Yeah, so there's just to reiterate, the plastics that we're exposed to now are affecting our generation, whether you stop it now or not. So it's, this is implications for future generations. On that note, do we have a happy note?
We have a happy question out there. No, this is really important science because once I learned this, I understood so much more, which is that it's not just about us, like you're just saying, Louie, it's about future generations. And the threat of an infertile population is, John, do you want to speak to that threat? The realistic threat of the infertility crisis that we're looking at because of phthalates?
Yeah. Well, it's not just phthalates.
And bisphenols in
it's all these chemicals and it's other things as well. Heat, by the way, is not good for fertility and sperm count, And the climate crisis is interacting with the toxic crisis to intensify the damage from each of those separately. So that's something to just put in your mind. It's not like, oh, well, I'll just worry about climate or I'll just worry about toxics. No, they're not separable, right? So, I actually wanted to add one more point, which is that our brains, like our genitals, are sexually dimorphic. They're different in males and females. Okay? Different. You probably know, like we'll say about a girl, oh, well, she's good at language, or a guy, well, he's good at finding his way in hard places. He's good at spatial recognition, and so that's built into the brain. That's a male and female, difference. That's governed by testosterone. Guess what happens if you lower testosterone? You alter the brain. And so we study not only the genitals, we also study behavioral changes, developmental changes, and we see, that these phthalates are affecting brain development as well. So we don't have a lot of time to go into that, but I want to mention there's probably not too many systems in the body that are not affected by these chemicals.
Thanks, Sean. All right, happy question. Can somebody help me out with who was next? Does anyone feel like they were next? Because I just see the left right here. I think you were, okay. Yeah?
Well, first I think I can say thank you all for not only the work you do, but for taking the time to come and talk to us today. As I think through these challenges, I think we've all felt that some of these are very big and daunting sometimes. It became clear in the discussion today that what you're talking about here is really a new set of life skills that we need to start teaching at the earliest stages, right? How to shop to find the right things you need, how to be less of a consumer and more of a reuser. Have you come across any communities or schools or anywhere, maybe probably outside the US these days, where they're starting to teach these things as well? Something that you could point us to and say, wow, this community or this group is starting to incorporate this into kindergarten, or I remember we used to have home ec classes and we used to have health education. Are these things being incorporated anywhere well that you can think of or that you come across?
Well, maybe I'll just say with all of our films, we have educational campaigns. We mentioned Racing Extinction, 44,000 teachers downloaded teacher materials for 2.5 million kids. That was like a 10-year-old statistic. It's got to be much more. But, so we have these campaigns where we're working with, our funders are pretty well endowed. The people that made this film happen, and we're working on educational campaigns. But what that looks like, I don't know. It's like that's like they say when you're done with the documentary, you're only halfway there. It's you really have to, it's that ongoing work. So we have a small team still working on these issues, every week. But
I'd just like to add that great question, important, and you should know that this is not taught in medical school. Physicians do not learn this. And how can they pass this on to their patients if they're not taught it? If information is not on the exam that they need to pass to get their license, they will not learn it. So that's a fundamental change that has to happen. We have to teach our physicians to be, and our nurses to be, and so they keep their patients healthy.
Well, the countdown refers to the drop in sperm rates. Is what percent a year for the last 50 years? And then Shanna found out that was true. It was a Danish study. Then went back in and reopened the data with the new meta-analysis, these big, generational changes. It's escalating now, so it's like
over 2% per year, formerly 1% per year. So it's confusing. It's dropping, yes, it's continuing to drop faster, a lot faster.
So males will need to be, will need IVF for almost everybody in the next 20 years.
Quickly regarding like schools specifically.
Is that heavy?
To address your question about the schools, what I've been able to see is that a lot of the schools are not opening up their doors to nonprofits to come in more often. When I first started doing this, it was really hard to get into a school. But I've seen a lot more schools be open to nonprofits coming in and educating. But there is, I have to warn, because I experienced this with my own children, is this real thing called climate anxiety, along with trash anxiety. My daughter ended up getting OCD and couldn't walk past a piece of trash without picking it up and had to get her help to get through that. That was really hard. So I caution us as well. It's like when we're educating our kids, we need to do it very sensitively without giving them a complex. I don't know the answer to that, but I think that education needs to happen, but the easiest way to do it is by adults leading by example. But the kids are getting a lot more education. When we go to these schools, we talk to them, and they're like, oh, we know that already. So in Hawaii specifically, and I bet in California as well, they're getting this education. Where the education needs to happen is in rural United States and the other side of the country. So that's where we need more.
Edward Abbey, famous environmentalist said, action is the antidote to despair. And so once you change one thing, you get the UFA app and you look at it and you change that one product, I think there's like a dopamine hit that you get, like, okay, what else can I do the next time I'm out of something? Think about the next thing that you buy so that you're slowly replacing everything in your house. You're detoxifying your closet, your pantry, your cleaning supplies, everything. Every action you do is a signal to the market that you're the change. And like I said, it makes me feel good every time I do that change.
Thanks, Louie. I always say every dollar is a vote. Every dollar is a vote. And thanks for bringing that in on the climate anxiety, Kahi. I've seen that a lot too. And I always feel that coming back to understanding our land and our oceans through a lens of love and hope over fear is a baseline for acting in the world that we need to do. And to answer your question really quick, and then we have to wrap up, I've heard Green School in Bali does a really good job. I'm sure there's a lot of schools here in the Bay that are outdoor schools that do a great job. And at Parley, we have Ocean Uprise, which is an amazing network of over 20 countries around the world, youth coming together, integrated into school systems, some of them, others after-school programs, virtual, in-person, to get inspired by the oceans first and foremost, and then learn about them. Julia,
I would just hop on that. I think telling people all this horrific, especially children, telling them all this horrific information is incredibly demotivating, but building relationships with nature is incredibly motivating. I'm proud of this place, like the work that you were doing in that park. It's like, well, of course I don't want trash here. This is like something I'm proud of. It's so beautiful. An organization in San Diego called Colores del Mar connects local kids with learning how to surf from a young age, where they might not otherwise have access. I think that's a great template. Scholastic News does a lot of coverage of inspiring climate solutions in a way that kids can understand. A fun thing that happened last year was Sway was featured on Earth Day in Scholastic News, and I had friends with kids who came home saying, this is your seaweed-based solution in this classic views, and kids all over America learned about our product, not in a scary way, but in a there's reasons to be curious, and that led to us giving lectures to like first grade classrooms. So I feel like invitation to the solutions and pride around nature, taking care of the things that you love, is probably the program that'll be most successful.
Thank you, Julia. And that leads me to a final quote that I want to share, which is Jane Goodall's quote, which was in your film, Louie. Without hope, speaking of what you're speaking to, without hope, we fall into apathy. So with that being said, let's give a round of applause for these amazing panelists. Thank you all so much. I have the utmost respect for all of you. Here is our contact information. Please stay in touch. I'm also going to be here. Some of you all will be here. Julia has amazing soy products over there. We'll have a little information about Parley there. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can sign up for Sway's newsletter, OPS, get our contact cards. I'm sorry for any questions we didn't get to answer, but you can ask them now or submit them to us. And then the last thing I'll say is I work here mostly remotely in the Bay. I manage our global programs at Parley in our 12 different countries around the world, and I really want to do more work here. More work building ideally an education station like the one Kahi has, building a co-working space and working with youth to expand our Oceanic Rights program here. So if you feel called to support or donate in any way, whether it's $5, $5,000, or just a meeting to learn about each other that's non-financial, so welcome that, and I'm really hoping to do more with the amazing community here in the Bay. So thank you so much.